Now I have a pleasure to invite Michał Rosołowski, one of the modest person, as he announced himself as the best speaker. But he's not only a great speaker, but he also is a great guitar player. He played the guitar, started a few rock bands. So he's quite interesting person. In Motorola, he's an Agile coach. He participated actively in the safe transformation and further Agile transformations in Motorola, helping organizations, teams, and also individuals in that process. And today, he will present us what Motorola learned from those transformations and how they transformed our company and what is our reality now. Please give warm welcome to Michał Rosołowski.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was almost embarrassing. You know what, from time to time in this job, you have to do things that by doing which you risk losing your job. And this is one of those. So I hope this is not going to be so bad. So this is going to be a very sincere and open sharing of what a significant part of Motorola did about introducing SAFe and about what we tried, about what we learned, about the mistakes that we did, and about the good things that we gained. So it sounds very boring. Even the title sounds boring, right? Lessons learned. I was shocked to see this a few months ago when doing a different training, actually for one of our colleagues sitting there from the finance department. And it seems like 70% of change programs fail. And then I thought, okay, what if 70% of construction works fail? Or 70% of aircrafts do not make it to the final destination? 70% is a very, very bad figure. So through all those conferences, hundreds of people are sharing knowledge. There are million books about how to run a transformation. There are millions of coaches that we can ask for help, and still 70%, according to Forbes, fails. When I say fail, I mean we initiate a transformation and then we have to roll back to the original state, or we initiate a transformation and then we end up in a strange state where we cannot move any farther. Or finally, we end up, we run the transformation and we conclude it with a result that we basically don't like, or the promises that were not delivered. 70% of those things fail. I'm showing this because the SAFe transformation that I'm going to be talking about can certainly be considered a change program, actually major change program, and a lot of colleagues and friends sitting here did participate in this. Also, you're going to be hearing some different lessons learned or some alternative views or complementing views from my colleagues like later. And you have to know that it's really, really difficult to objectively assess a transformation like this by a single person. Okay, so I am aware that some of you guys may not agree with that or may have complementary view. This is life about complex things. What I also have to say is that Motorola is now 91 years old. And as we saw in Ari's presentation, there are less and less companies with that legacy, in a good way, in the market. Some of them already died, right? Like Kodak, Then it has to be an act of courage for a company to decide to reduce the waterfall and attempt to do some agile transformation at a very large scale. no matter what the result is, it is an act of bravery to do this, in my opinion. Especially that, that it involved over 1,500 people, right? And it attempted to basically elevate Agile beyond the Scrum team level, right? So we've been good practicing Scrum, often Scrum but still, I think Krakow site was fairly mature about doing Scrum. But the glass ceiling was very quickly reached, right? So, okay, Scrum is there, now you have to fit Scrum into this waterfall thing. Okay, and large-scale Agile doesn't fit us, and we have specific customers, specific needs. So after 91 years, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but after a long time, the company is attempting to reduce waterfall. This is courageous. So within those 2 years that you can see here, we ended up operating in 6 value streams, 12 trains, and multiple portfolios. By the way, how many of you have already heard about SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework? Okay. This is good. I think after the introduction that Anya has made, I can say very few things about what I do, okay? So, yeah, and we started this role with a blank sheet of paper with my boss sitting there a few years ago. Except for being the Agile coach in the company, like facilitating large-scale events or helping teams or helping individuals or running retrospectives or providing trainings or doing some recruitment activities for the Scrum Masters, this is the normal thing I do. But upon the initiation of the transformation, the company decided to invest into the SAFe consultancy certificate, in my case. Okay, so the company made an investment upon transformation start to invest into a few SAFe coaches. And I had the privilege to be in that group. Actually, there was like 4 or 5 coaches initially. So they sent us to Colorado. And we had the privilege of taking like a 1-week class with Dean Leffingwell, so the guy who created SAFe, the elderly person there, with all due respect, which was very insightful because you could hear about SAFe from the author of SAFe. You could ask questions. And I'm showing this because I want to underline that I think I have fairly good knowledge about SAFe. And I think I had a chance to clarify some of my SAFe questions or doubts at the source during that week, which was great. And I only have 1 hour, and I was thinking a lot, what kind of metaphor am I supposed to use to explain to people what kind of products or systems we do, how much complex they are, and what kind of dependencies are there. And I could use the entire hour to talk about, public safety communication systems and, controllers and base stations, and that would be difficult. So I was looking for a metaphor, and there I stole it from the internet. So imagine the product of SAFe were supposed to be those candy bars. This is the end product that we deliver. Now, they all have one manufacturer, like, I don't know, PepsiCo or whoever, Kraft Foods. They all have something in common, right? Those are candy bars, and they have some fancy wrappings, and they have chocolate, and they have some maybe common ingredients. Yet they are different. Otherwise, they would not exist in the market. So we are delivering a family of candy bars. And we are starting SAFe transformation to deliver those candy bars. Or so we thought. A few years before this transformation, SAFe 4.0 did not exist. There was only SAFe 3.0 available. And then, to the best of my memory, the top management decided not to go into SAFe.3 because for large and complex organizations like ours, SAFe 3.0 was not sophisticated enough. It offered only 3 layers, which was disappointing. But after a few years, Leffingwell and his folks invented SAFe 4.0, adding the value stream layer. And that somehow started to fit. Now that was the model that we decided to go. And so we did, right? So we used to have something I could call component teams for those candy bars. It was like a chocolate team or nuts team or crispy bottom team. I mean a train, okay, large organization, or some toppings or covers, if you will. Obviously, there were Scrum teams inside of them. So there was like a peanut Scrum team and the walnut Scrum team and almond Scrum team, right? More or less specialized. But the key thing to remember was the way that Motorola was divided back then was around those components. And they somehow fit because they had a common theme around them. They had fairly like 100 people inside of them. They had one chain of management around them. So it immediately started to look like a train. So there we go. It was easy. We already had the trains, right? Now, since we went into SAFe 4.0, we had to use the value streams. That's the part of the model. That's okay. So we created a few organizations, again, with a separate chain of command, with a separate management, with separate roles around them. And we called them value streams. In this example, you can think about different families of candy bars, like low-calorie candy bar or high-calorie candy bar, or the so-called healthy food, not healthy at all. And this is how we filled up the value stream level. So far, SAFe is really working for us. And then at the portfolio level, we finally called the entire organization delivering the candy bars, a candy bars portfolio. But then we realized that there is another organization under a different management which delivers the wrappings. Now there's no candy bar without the wrappings. So then we already had 2 portfolios. And I remember some discussions about, hey, does this SAFe really fit us? Is this the right framework for us? Because we clearly lack the 5th layer. I'm sure Dean Leffingwell is already working on SAFe 5.0 for companies like this. But that was the discussion we had back at the time. What kind of level are we going to use to finally meet and deliver the candy bar? So as you can see here, different things started to happen. So you can see that the organization responsible for low-calorie candy bars, they need some ingredients to deliver the candy bars. But the high-calorie candy bars is competing for the same resources from time to time. So we have a competition for resources. I hate that word, but for people, for engineers, right? So those organizations called trains, they are now delivering to multiple value streams, right? And same about the 3rd value stream. So we can see a competition for resources. Back at the time, we had trains that delivered some common solutions to multiple candy bars, so like common chocolate. No more like Mars chocolate, Snickers chocolate, and Twix chocolate. It's cheaper to produce common chocolate, obviously. But the result is that if you want to deliver different kinds of candy bars, you have to compete for the chocolate. So the question is really, so how do we deliver a candy bar to the end user through this resource utilization machine, as I call it? It's a resource utilization machine. How do we do this? And the idea that we had, and also SAFe offered those kind of roles. Oh, I'm sorry. What's wrong? Okay. So the idea was that, okay, so we're going to be filtering out the epic stories and capabilities and whatever else there was belonging to each particular candy bar through a separate managers or managerial group interested in only delivering that kind of candy bar. So in addition to, competition for resources, now we had a few project managers asking the same organizations for different data because they are only interested in their own candy bar. That results in communication traffic, that results in information loss, that results in sometimes literally pissing people off with the traffic that is being generated. That was the idea. And I think with that idea, we remained almost to the end of the transformation, right? And I will be returning to this picture several times in this presentation. So my diagnosis of SAFe, again, it's somehow subjective, and there are also different opinions about this transformation. My diagnosis is based on a few communities, or so to speak, that I had the privilege to participate. Okay, so a few times the entire large organization did retrospectives with managers and leaders, also senior leaders, which I participated in, and a few of my colleagues. There is still a Scrum Master community of practice that has discussed this topic 1 million times. A few times we sent like a large-scale survey to people asking, hey, do they think this works? Do they think this is the right way of organizing things? Do they feel we are like speeding up? So we have some data by just asking people. And upon the end of the transformation, actually, upon the end of this transformation, we had a so-called SAFe transformation team. So it was like a think tank. So it was a group of experienced, let's say, agilists and managers and leaders that were supposed to diagnose the whole organization and give advice, like an internal consulting group, okay? Unfortunately, with very little power, like power to change things. So when I combine, my participation in those groups, this is the kind of picture of the transformation that I see. And before I start to enumerate the good things done and the bad things done, I think there's a master thing that we need to touch. And I think every transformation of that kind has to touch that problem. So if you want SAFe, or if you want to change things, why do you want that? I don't like this statement, but what is the problem we are trying to solve? Or what is the vision that we want to get to? Why do we need this thing? And I think that we could do a better job, we as the organization, defining that goal. So I heard some statements like, okay, this is because we no longer want waterfall. We have to stop waterfall, like stop Darth Vader, or stop the Emperor, or stop. So waterfall is not an evil ideology, right? You don't need to stop it. It doesn't hurt, right? I also heard some statements about efficiency and speed. So speed and efficiency, that's what I remember. Some people already paraphrased it to faster and cheaper. Now, faster and cheaper doesn't sell well, right? It's difficult to get buy-in from people if we justify the need for the SAFe by saying faster and cheaper. I think this is not enough. So my message is really, before we do transformations like this, we need to be able to answer difficult questions. Because if we don't do this, it's difficult to evaluate the success of the transformation, right? Are we successful? Have we resolved our problem? It's difficult to be fairly objective about, are we going in the right direction or not with this transformation if we don't define the problem we are solving. I'm not saying this is easy, but I think I'd like to hear more back at the time about the problem we are solving. And when I thought, when I was doing this presentation, preparing it and paraphrasing it, I think most of my observations about safe rollout can be reduced to two simple statements. And I felt like a relief when I did this. I felt like a catharsis. I felt good when I did this. So I think the transformation that I'm talking about is a combination of two kinds of streams or actions. So SAFE, in my opinion, is a framework that is advertising a lot of good things. It has a lot of good ideas, a lot of good values, and a lot of good practices. And I will be talking about the right SAFE ideas that, in my opinion, we did not roll out the right way. And vice versa. I think SAFE has a few flaws, a few bad things embedded within that we were very, very diligent implementing, and we implemented them so right. If you combine these two, there is a risk about a transformation success. So when I talk about the right things that we could do a better job about, I'm going to be talking about those four. So SAFE says that the value delivery is more important than resource utilization, and you cannot match those two. It's always a trade-off. Okay. Referring to what Ari was talking in the morning, the only variable that we can use in all those frameworks is scope. It's the scope that we are using as the only variable, because everything else is fixed. We are funding stable value streams and stable trains, right? We are giving them a rhythm, which is fixed. This is why they use these trains nomenclature, right? We expect fixed quality and fixed definition of done. The only variable in that framework is scope. I like the idea of concluding every PI with something valuable. And when I think valuable, I mean end-to-end working software that is tested, demonstrable, and useful from the system, from the candy bar point of view. And last but not least, I think SAFE is doing a very good job providing the know-how and providing guidance to the leaders and managers what lean and agile mindset means. And they're using very, very nice quotes from Deming and from other, let's say, thought leaders. I think those are really the right ideas. So if we want to stop on the resource utilization theme, you have to realize that there are some things in life where resource utilization does not work. So the ambulance is arriving when you have a heart attack, only because no one is asking the ambulance to be fully utilized. It does not cruise around the city like crazy, because it would never get to you. You could die, right? If you have a relay race, which I very often, I'm sorry for repeating those cliches here. If you have a relay race, there is no way of 100% resource utilization. I always tell this joke that some of the managers managing the relay race couldn't stand that feeling that those guys are not running, and they would ask them immediately to run somewhere, waiting for the stick. When you do this, they will either not arrive on time when there's a moment to pass the stick, or they will be exhausted and they will not win. This is so obvious. This is why I like it so much. Because we rebranded some of our component-like organizations to trains, right? We caused a few undesired things happening. So you saw the dependencies, you saw the competition for resources, right? You then ask for PI planning, which is an attribute of a train, right? It's trains that are having the PI planning. Now, you have your PI planning about the chocolate, and your partners are everywhere, but not in your room. You have just milk chocolate and dark chocolate, and you have like white chocolate, but it's just a small part of value. Your dependencies are in the other trains, not in the room that you're asking them to stay. This is really important difference. I'll get back to the PI planning later. Because we rebranded our existing organizations very quickly, we had those discussions about the fifth layer, which I think were not needed. So we didn't need the fifth layer. We needed perhaps better organization of our org structures, maybe more value-centric, but definitely not the fifth layer. And it's like with microservices. I think the decision about how you want to shape your org structures, what you want to call train and value stream, is one of the most critical decisions you can take upon your transformation start, because it's difficult to revert it. We cannot change those structures forever. We cannot change them every month. People are frustrated, disappointed, and uncomfortable. It's one of the most important decisions to take upon transformation start, in my opinion, and has to be thought through. Where's the balance between the resource utilization and value delivery? Because of this rebranding also, we had difficulties sponsoring some strategic stuff. Like, okay, finally, you know, the chocolate and the peanuts and the crispy bottom have to meet and deliver value. Who's going to sponsor like DevOps environment? Who's going to sponsor the testing pipeline? This is difficult because if I sponsor this, I have less resources to utilize for doing my little piece. Who's going to sponsor that? I also remember cases where people responsible for defining the scope, like epics or capabilities or features, were tempted to define it so it fits the given layer. Okay, so you had like a chocolate epic, do something about the chocolate. Then you have to wait for another train to deliver the crispy bottom, and then you have to wait for another train. So sometimes by doing this, we are fooling us. We are just trying to make people busy so that they have things to do. But in order to collect the value, we have to wait for our partners, right? The keyboard thing, I probably, have you seen the keyboard thing in Klaus Leopold's lectures about business agility? So there's a brilliant guy called Klaus Leopold. I think he's German, and he has a series of lectures about business agility. So he's demonstrating the things I'm showing to you now using a keyboard example. So if your organization is a keyboard, and you are structuring your teams or trains by the type of keys. So you have the numeral organization, and you have the function keys organization, and you have letters organization, and so on. You have a problem if the business that you do is writing love letters. It's very difficult to write a love letter if your teams are divided by the type of keys in the keyboard, because of interactions, because of dependencies, because of communication traffic, because of, you get the point. I told you this is going to be full of cliches. So who of you has already seen this picture in the internet? Very good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for disappointing you with that, with that kind of content. Now, I love this Mona Lisa stuff. because my feeling about the transformation that we did is it took us as much as here. Okay, so traditional waterfall model was like this. Safe, well, in Safe we managed to incrementally and iteratively paint this picture. But in both approaches, the whole process starts with a very detailed projection of the image to be drawn. It's just a matter of implementation style, which is different. But both those processes start with a complete detailed projections of the picture to be painted. Unlike this one. I told you there's going to be cliches, right? Speaking of resource management, speaking of scope management, even if we wanted to manage scope dynamically, I'm sorry. We had a few constraints. So for some part of the business that we do, we still have very long, very fixed commitments done up front with our customers. In that case, the value that we deliver is strictly binary. So it's either all or nothing. There is no immediate value in the process. The value is when we all are done with our 1 year long development. Because the commitments are distant, there is a lot of upfront work. And this kind of way of doing business is giving us very little flexibility. So we didn't do much about our commitments, about our way of making agreements with our partners, with our customers. Also, what I noticed is that if we start defining epics at the very top level, the topics are typically functional end-to-end, so they really represented the end-to-end functionality that the customer is expecting to get. But pretty often, when you broke those epics down to capabilities and features and stories, they do not become functional anymore. They seem like those WBSs, like work breakdown structure. So basically, in order to get something end-to-end functional, we have to wait for the epic layer. Right. And I call it puzzle scope. Because of this, we had this. So we had to make it to the date, and we had to make it with the scope. We just received the Agile toolkit and iterative process. So there were cases where we overcommitted stuff, where we pushed people too far for taking too much and giving them too little or zero buffer to secure the commitments that they were making. Unfortunately, this is a result if you have one and only success definition at the very end. So I'm posting this picture here, which I really love. Because if we knew that the time is always too little, we would never draw a horse like this. No one will draw a horse like this if you know that time is always too little. The value every PI. I like the idea of the PI being concluded with something valuable. In our case, fairly often, we had to follow the PI with the long system testing or candy bar testing. And why is that? In the extreme case, after a few months of PI, we needed a few months of system testing. Why is that? We needed the system testing off-ramp because we had a very limited system testing inside our PI, right? So the more we focus on the box testing, the less continuous integration environment we have ready, the more end-to-end testing we have to defer to post-PI. And this is what happened. And again, we've discussed who would sponsor that. Who would sponsor the continuous integration pipeline? Who would sponsor the DevOps team? It also happens that when you design your trains the wrong way, they will have misaligned priorities. So what's important for the chocolate train on number 1 is less important for the crispy bottom train. And we are meeting somewhere randomly inside the PI, typically towards the end of the PI, which again carries over the feedback to the next PI. And obvious thing, if your scope is too big, it may not even fit the API or barely fit. Do you know what this is? Don't tell. How does it look to you? Very good. It was supposed to be a nuclear power plant. It was supposed to be the first Polish nuclear power plant in Żarnowiec in the 80s. And this is how it looks today. So the government building it had everything they thought they could be successful with a transformation like this. They had power, they had know-how, they had technology. They even had the perfect geographical spot because the lakes surrounding it would naturally cool down the reactor temperature. How do you think why they failed? No? Society. So the lack of buy-in from the people living nearby was so big, and they were so much protesting and objecting, especially that we were a few years after the Chernobyl incident, that the government had to give up. And they never finished it. So why am I showing this? I'm showing this because SAFe is promoting a lot of good lean and agile mindset among the leaders, which I think we somehow lacked, or I could use more of that mindset. So for example, if we talk about communication practices, about transformation vision, about transformation impediments, about transformation progress, I think we could do a better job about it as the management or leadership team. Same about experimenting and learning and like evaluating new ways of doing stuff. I think for a transformation like this, we could use more agile coaches or SAFe coaches. We had under 10 of them, which I think is too few. I think it's too few coaches or consultants that can help the organization. The pressure for resource utilization was sometimes very, very big, and I think the management team has a lot to say about what's important. Is it resource utilization or is it value delivery? And last but not least, some tasks in the transformation cannot be delegated, and this is what Leffingwell is saying. They cannot be delegated to a transformation team of consultants. They cannot be delegated to RTE. They cannot be delegated to VSE. They cannot. But to be fair with this presentation, I think I have to say about what I don't like about SAFe and what I think is inherently wrong with this framework. Despite meeting Dean Leffingwell in a single room, I want to say about 3 things. I want to say about the layers, I want to say about the PA planning event, and I want to say about the false promises. Do you remember that advertisement, No More Tears, about the Johnson's shampoo? The tears in SAFe bring something very awkward. So as you know, SAFe 4.0 is made of 4 different tiers. I'm really afraid of what SAFe 5.0 would introduce, but there are a few bad things about introducing those layers. So first of all, if we have the layers, we immediately have the backlog hierarchy. from initiative to capability to feature to story to task to everything. And like I said, in our case, mostly the top layer of scope was functional. The rest of them was little functional. Then you have to wait for the last task to finish the last story, to finish the last feature, to finish the last epic, to finish the last capability, to finally close your increment of value. And the more layers we got, the more inertia, the more, bad things are happening. The longer the cycle times. So you close the task. How fast is this reflected at the portfolio level through those layers? Never, okay, I mean, it wasn't that bad, but definitely long, right? Layers introduce plenty of roles. Especially some roles are introduced through the copy-paste activity. Okay, you have a Scrum Master, you're good. Then you need a train. Okay, we're going to add you an RTE. You need value stream. Fair enough, you're going to get a VSE, right? You need a low-level architect. You got it. You need higher-level architect. You got it. It's a copy-paste. It's a fractal model. Some roles have very, very different, like a blurred responsibilities. To this day, I did not understand what business owners do in this model. So I encourage you to look into the SAFe documentation and try to understand what does the business owner do. I don't understand it. I'm sorry, but I don't understand it. So maybe you could say instead of reducing the number of roles or consolidating the roles, SAFe, I think, is promoting a lot of roles. A lot of roles means a lot of politics, a lot of conflicts, a lot of communication traffic, a lot of inertia. And like it or not, SAFe through his layers is basically a waterfall framework. It's just different things that are waterfalling. Okay, so it's the communication that is waterfalling, it's decisions that are waterfalling, it's the feedback loops, information, and more things that are waterfalling. And waterfalling means the light cycle time, information loss, office politics, and all the bad things. And it's what the layers do. Now the PI planning, and I mean the PI planning for over 100 people. I had a task to facilitate a few of those. Actually, you can see some authentic meetings that myself and a few of my colleagues facilitated. And the way SAFe defines the PI planning has a lot of difficulties putting into practice. So, for example, they ask you to break down all the epics to the stories up front and do this at the very PI planning ceremony. Now you end up in 100 stories. They very quickly lose their accuracy over time. So we have to dedicate a lot of effort to break down everything to stories, and they will, after the first or two sprints, they will just lose their accuracy. How many of you guys have been in a 120 people meeting like this? Okay, then I'm sorry. It's noisy, it's chaotic, and it's a very, very bad place for focused work on your product, thinking about how it will work, thinking about what kind of story I want to make. Maybe it's a good meeting for aligning people or for information, delivery, but it's a very, very bad meeting to be creative. And SAFe is telling you, okay, you have to be creative in this meeting, you have to break it down to stories, you have to do all that shit in this 2-day-long meeting, which is very, very difficult. Not to mention the facility, the logistics, and the cost. We had to rent a hotel or rooms like this initially to fit all those people there and provide them, drinks, refreshments, and everything, which is difficult. Okay. Even if you have time and you feel comfortable, after, 20 stories, your brain does not work. You will not be the same creative for the first 20 stories and the remaining 100 stories. You just won't. And sooner or later, we realized that in order to get prepared for this meeting, we need a pre-PI planning meeting, which is, again, contrary to what SAFe says. So SAFe is saying, do all that stuff in the PI meeting. Our lessons learned, without preparation, If we have people see those stories for the first time in their life in this meeting, they will fail. They will result in, I have to go and check. Unfortunately. Do you recognize this? It's a shopping TV, right? It's a shopping TV that is delivering a false promises sometimes. Okay, another great vacuum, another great, audio system, another great kitchen utility that you have to buy because it's great. Then you buy it and you're disappointed. As far as I understand, SAFE is a product. It's a commercial product that in the first place is supposed to feed its creator. If it helps you, that's great, but it's supposed to help Dean Leffingwell and his Scaled Agile Incorporated, Colorado, which I really envy, and I'm jealous about it, that it's not my business. I'd love this to be my business. So we have to be careful buying in everything that they say, because sometimes I have a feeling that they will say anything to make this product attractive to corporations, right? If they feel you need a fifth layer, they will introduce the fifth layer if you want it. That's reality. So SAFE as a product is offering a few hooks, a few promises that we got into and anyone can get into. For example, it offers a promise of easy and linear and logical scaling. If it's a promise. So you have a few Scrum teams, embed them in a train. You need more trains, that's okay, embed them in a value stream. You need more value streams, embed them in a portfolio. This is linear, but the complexity in the organization through introducing new layers is not linear. So with every layer, there is more communication traffic, more misunderstandings, more competition for resources, and more office politics. It just looks linear because it's catchy, but I can't imagine 5 layers SAFE. It's just naive to think that way. It also offers some easy rebranding of existing roles. There's so many roles in this framework that every large organization will find something that they feel comfortable with, right? So it does not promote, like I said, consolidating roles or reducing the number of roles or reducing the distance between those who do software and those who do business. It rather preserves how the company looks like if we just copy-paste SAFE. And it offers so many fancy and contemporary words and ideas in a one framework I've never seen in any other framework. So it combines Kanban, Scrum, DevOps, value streams, everything that is catchy, appealing, and popular in the market, in my opinion. But if you look what's behind these in the framework, sometimes it's very disappointing. If you look into the portfolio Kanban, how much Kanban is there in a portfolio Kanban, guys? You have to check yourself. And what kind of Kanban we are talking about if the inertia from Epic to tasks is taking so long? What kind of pull system is this, really? Not to mention, fancy certificates, fancy conferences, fancy, branding of SAFE, which only adds a professional feeling about this framework. In my opinion, this is exaggerated. However, regardless of how the transformation went, which I'm going to talk about in the last 2 slides, there are some benefits of introducing this framework. Okay, so introducing SAFE resulted in very, very large agile awareness, also among our leaders, among managers, among developers, and it was synchronized in time. Okay, so we all learned together from the same source, using the same nomenclature. Okay, and I think it's a very good starting point. It was a very good starting point for a 91-year-old organization to begin with. And as you know, SAFE is very well documented, which for some people is an advantage. Where are we now? Those are the only 2 slides with a lot of text, and then I'm done. So we'll make it to the lunch. So where are we now? Okay, SAFE I think the traditional safe transformation ended like almost 2 years ago. We took a few decisions, or our leadership team took a few decisions that, in my opinion, helped to move the transformation forward. And those decisions, some of them can only be taken by people with power. So first of all, a few of those candy bars became separate value streams. So we used the term value stream to define a candy bar, not virtual organization or political organization, just true candy bar. So we have Mars and Snickers value streams, right? Some of the common ingredients were intentionally decoupled. So despite we know that we're doing bad thing decoupling, we allowed for, Mars chocolate team and Snickers chocolate team so that they can stay with their value streams and deliver the value fast with their partners, not in a chocolate department, but in a Mars department and in a Snickers department. This is what we did, right? Some guys previously holding architectural or system testing roles in some value streams, they joined the Scrum teams to help with the expertise and with their know-how about doing iteration job right. Referring to what Ari said in the beginning, I'm glad because he did a very good foundation for this presentation. Every value stream was allowed to go on with their own workflow as they please, with only a few constraints. So it has to be Scrum-based, it has to be 2-week-long sprints, and maybe a few more. So this is risky because then you're making more mistakes and then you have to learn more and you can't do it right the first time. But then, on the other hand, people receive autonomy and people can design practices that fit their environment, not one-size-fits-all safe commercial product. Now, the wrappings and the candy bars recently became a single organization under a single supervisor, right? And we have a few colleagues here in the room from Malaysia that are now the same organization as the counterpart, as the candy bars. Sorry for using those words here. It was mandated that we have only epics, stories, and initiatives. So they eliminated at least one layer, and they mandated that the epics are defined in a way that they are roughly 1 month long. So no more half a year long epics. They are not permitted. So the scope authorities, like the product owners, have to do a better job defining chunks around 1 month long. We completely switched to Jira. Previously, we used 3 different systems for tracking work. We used an Excel sheet, we used version 1, we used Jira, and we also used for a moment, what was the name of it? AgileCraft. Yeah, AgileCraft. Now it's just Jira with some portfolio add-ons and heavy usage of EasyBI, if you know what I'm saying. The organizations received a lot of freedom about defining the PI increments. We don't call them that way, but we have a lot of freedom designing the PI increments. It can be from 2 weeks to 3 months, and this is actually the range we have. So in this room, there are people who are using 2-week-long planning, and we have people in the room who are using 3-month-long planning because they find it valuable. Okay, we convinced our management to stop looking at velocity as the productivity measure and rather starting to measure completed stories and completed epics. So we are measuring cycle time a lot more frequently than we do with velocity, right? And there are plenty more. So the first few authentic and empowered POs appeared, and I know cases where we finally managed to define small but functional piece of scope that we call MVP, or minimum viable feature. The management agreed to dedicate 15% of every month's engineering effort to designing continuous integration environment. So this is a huge investment, okay? The developers received 15% of time and effort to invest into continuous integration at scale, which is difficult, right? It's difficult even not at scale. They introduced zero defect policy. That is a rule that you do not initiate a new development if you have an open defect. If you have an open defect, you have to stop and fix the defect and then continue with your work. So it is not permitted to build new features on a faulty baseline. It is prohibited, basically. So, you know, years have passed, and I still have the impression that the journey has barely begun. So the easy, ready-made solution, I think, was at least as much as a good starting point. But now we are at the stage of learning, about trying, about experimenting, and I think this is the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have
Thanks.
also a small
oh my God.
for you.
I expected that. Thank you very much. Yes. Thanks.
I know that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to make it really fast, but few important notes for you. So first of all, lunch is served downstairs on the ground floor in the hotel restaurant. So you're all welcome there in a few minutes. And I would like to remind you about today's party. So if you do not have any plans for the evening, please join us at 6 p.m. at the tea time brew pub. So I hope we'll have more interesting talks then, and also some relax.
We will be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And important note, just after the lunch at 1 p.m., we'll start second part of our conference that will be split into 4 tracks. So we'll have 2 separate lectures track. First track will happen here in the Alpha 1. Second lecture track will happen in the Alpha 2 meeting room. So please check on your agenda in which lecture you're interested in. And in case you manage to sign in for the workshops, 2 workshops tracks will be held in Beta 1 and Beta 2. So please check your agenda. Okay, and please have in mind to post some updates on your social media using Agile Swarming hashtag, and then you maybe surprise will wait for you tomorrow. And now there's a lunchtime. Enjoy.
Enjoy. Thank you.